They didn't need me, until they couldn't move forward without me. That realization didn't come with a dramatic reveal. No raised voices, no stunned silence. Just a quiet email at 6:12 a.m. with the subject line, "Urgent, signature required." I stared at it for a long second, coffee cooling in my hand, and thought, yeah, that tracks. 8 years of being invisible. And now suddenly, I was essential. Funny how that works. I leaned back in my kitchen chair, sunlight just starting to hit the counter, and let myself feel it for a second, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just clarity. Because if you'd asked anyone in that building who I was, they'd probably say something like, "Oh, Ryan? Yeah, solid guy. Keeps his head down." That was the polite version. The real version? Ryan was the guy who stayed late, fixed problems quietly, and watched promotions pass him by like he wasn't even in the lane. And I let them. For a while. 8 years earlier, I walked into Holbrook Systems with a pressed shirt, a decent resume, and a kind of optimism that only people fresh out of proving themselves somewhere else still carry. I wasn't naive. But I believed in structure. In merit. In the idea that if you did your job well enough, consistently enough, it would speak for itself. Turns out, it doesn't. Not unless someone's listening. My first year, I outperformed my team lead on every metric that mattered. I didn't advertise it, I just did the work. Stayed late, learned systems nobody wanted to touch, took on the kind of projects that don't get applause but keep things from falling apart. At my annual review, my manager at the time, Steve, skimmed my file like he was checking a grocery list. "Good stuff, Ryan. Really solid," he said, tapping the folder closed. "Just keep doing what you're doing." I nodded. What would it take to move into a lead role? He smiled. Not unkindly. Just, vaguely. "You're on the right path." That phrase became a pattern. Second year, same conversation. Third year, same outcome. By year 4, I stopped asking. Because by then, I'd started noticing something else. Promotions weren't about performance. They were about presence. Who spoke up in meetings? Who grabbed attention? Who played the room? And more importantly, who leadership liked. That's when Brandon Cole showed up. Brandon didn't build anything. He didn't fix systems or stay late solving problems no one else could figure out. What Brandon did, really well, was own the room. Confident handshake. Slight smirk. The kind of voice that made people lean in even when he wasn't saying much. Within 6 months, he was leading projects I'd spent years stabilizing. I remember the first time he called me into his office. Glass walls. Clean desk. That faint smell of expensive cologne. "Ryan, right?" he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd been there forever. "Yeah. I've been reviewing your work. Impressive stuff." I nodded. "Appreciate that." He smiled. "I'm gonna need you to support me on the transition. You know the systems better than anyone." There it was. Not recognition. Not advancement. Support. "Of course," I said. Calm. Neutral. Because by then, I understood the game. And I wasn't ready to play it yet. So I stayed where I was. Not stuck, just observing. Watching how decisions got made. Who influenced them. Where the real power sat. Brandon moved fast. Promotions. Visibility. He built a team around himself, people who mirrored his energy, his style. Loud, confident, always in motion. And every time something went wrong behind the scenes, it came back to me. "Ryan, can you take a look at this? Ryan, can you stabilize this rollout? Ryan, we need your help," quietly. I became the safety net nobody talked about. And for a long time, I let it stay that way. Because here's the thing about being underestimated, it gives you time. Time to see patterns. Time to understand leverage. Time to decide when it actually matters. The shift didn't happen all at once. It started with a contract. Holbrook was expanding, big move into a new sector. Complex infrastructure, high-stakes clients, tight deadlines. The kind of deal that gets executives involved. Brandon was leading it, of course. But the core architecture? The system design that everything depended on? That was mine. Built over years. Quietly. Piece by piece. And buried in that system, because I'd insisted on it from day one, was a control mechanism. A compliance layer that required final authorization from the system architect before full deployment. At the time, it was just good practice. Risk management. No one paid much attention to it. Except me. I didn't think much of it, until I saw how the rollout was being handled. Corners cut. Deadlines prioritized over stability. Brandon pushing forward because he needed the win. I brought it up once. Calmly. We should slow this phase. There are dependencies that haven't been fully tested. He waved it off. We're good, Ryan. Trust the process. I almost laughed at that. Trust the process. But I nodded. Got it. And I stepped back. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because I knew something he didn't. When that system went live, it wouldn't matter how confident he sounded in a meeting. It would matter whether the foundation held. And if it didn't, they'd come looking for the one person who actually understood it. The email came 3 weeks later. Urgent, signature required. I opened it. Formal language. Legal oversight. Compliance requirements. And right there, in clean, undeniable terms. Final deployment authorization required my sign-off. My name. Not Brandon's. Not the executive board's. Mine. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I went into work like any other day. Same desk. Same quiet routine. But the energy in the building? Different. Tighter. Edges showing. People moving faster. Conversations cutting off when doors opened. By mid-morning, I got the call. Ryan, can you come upstairs? It was Melissa from Executive Ops. Her tone was polite, but there was something under it. Sure, I said. Brandon's office was full when I walked in. Brandon. 2 executives. Legal counsel. Everyone standing. Brandon gave me that same confident smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. Ryan. Thanks for coming. I nodded. What's up? One of the executives stepped forward. We need to finalize the deployment. There's a compliance requirement that needs your authorization. I looked at the document on the table. I already knew what it said. Right, I said. Calm. Brandon leaned in slightly. It's just a formality. We're good to go. That phrase again. I glanced at him. Then at the system reports on the screen behind them. Metrics I recognized instantly. Flags. Not catastrophic, but not clean. Not ready. I tapped the paper lightly. Have these issues been resolved? Brandon's smile tightened. They're minor. We'll handle them post-deployment. I met his eyes. That's not how this system was designed. Silence. Subtle, but there. One of the executives cleared his throat. Ryan, we're on a timeline here. I nodded. I understand. And I did. But timelines don't override architecture. I took a breath. Not heavy. Just enough. I can't sign this yet. You could feel the shift in the room. Brandon straightened. Excuse me? The system isn't stable enough for full deployment, I said. Even tone. No edge. If we push this live as is, you're going to run into issues that are harder to fix later. He stepped closer. Not aggressive, just assertive. We've already committed to the rollout. I held his gaze. Then we should have addressed the dependencies when they came up. That landed. Not loud. But clear. For a second, nobody spoke. Then the legal counsel chimed in. What specifically needs to be resolved? And just like that, the conversation shifted. Away from Brandon. Toward me. I walked them through it. Clean, precise. No emotion. Where the risks were. What needed to be fixed. How long it would take. 15 minutes. That's all it took. 15 minutes to reframe the entire situation. By the end of it, the executives weren't looking at Brandon anymore. They were looking at me. Can you lead the stabilization? One of them asked. I paused. Not for effect. Just consideration. Yeah, I said. If we're doing it right. Brandon didn't say anything. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral. But I could see it. The realization. This wasn't about confidence anymore. This was about control. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Just, steadily. I was looped into meetings I'd never been invited to before. Decisions ran through me, not because I demanded it, but because it made sense. The system stabilized. Clean. Efficient. No shortcuts. And when it finally went live, it worked. No issues. No scrambling. No quiet fixes behind the scenes. Just, solid execution. At the final review, the same executive who'd asked for my signature leaned back in his chair and said, "This should have been handled like this from the start." Nobody argued. Brandon nodded. Slightly. Agreed. That was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I ever got from him. And honestly, that was enough. A week later, I got a new offer. Formal title. Leadership role. Direct authority over system architecture. It was everything I'd been passed over for, on paper. Melissa handed me the document with a small smile. Well deserved. I looked at it. Then I looked up. Thanks, I said. And I meant it. But I didn't rush to sign. Because here's what 8 years teaches you. Recognition isn't the same as respect. And timing? That's everything. I took the offer home. Sat at the same kitchen table where I'd read that first email. Same morning light. Different feeling. Not vindication. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. I'd spent years thinking the goal was to be seen. To be recognized. To finally get what I'd earned. But sitting there, looking at that offer, I realized something. Simpler. I didn't need them to see me. I just needed to know when it mattered that they did. The next morning, I went back in. Same calm. Same routine. I signed the offer. Not because they finally chose me. But because I chose the moment. And as I walked out of that office, past the same glass walls, the same quiet nods from people who were just starting to notice, I realized something that stayed with me. They didn't promote me after 8 years. They adjusted to me. And that made all the difference.